Hello, welcome back. That was a party. Truly, it was a party downstairs. It was like, wow, all we needed was streamers and a strobe light or something. There was a lot of energy. It was good. Okay, so you who have been here before know what we do, which is this is time for discussion, questions. I will call them explorations rather than answers. That would be more accurate. And if you're new here, please feel free to ask your questions. And someone will be passing around a microphone because I will tell you why we do that, because people are sometimes microphone shy. We're not trying to do anything special about the room here. There are people listening on streaming and they can't hear your questions unless you use the mic and speak right into it. And Mary.
So I was thinking about this when we were practicing a little bit as I watched my thoughts come and go. And okay, so I'll just be succinct. Basically what is the difference, and I feel like I have an opinion that there's a difference, but I'm not sure if I'm right, between grasping and longing. Because you talk about longing to see your teacher, but sometimes it can feel a little like grasping too, like, oh, if I don't get that, then I'm not going to be happy, so anyway, so it's just sort of been trying to roll it around in my head.
Longing and grasping. And you mentioned the longing was related to your devotion to your teacher.
Like an example, that would be in classically, I guess when you read often, you think you long when you're reading in the teachings about longing. It's usually in more positive context. And then grasping feels more to do with attachment and aversion. But I started thinking maybe there's something in that I'm missing.
Oh, it's just so much. Mugu, this I'm going to start with the longing for your spiritual teacher is considered a very healthy thing. I long to see my teachers. I long for Lama Michael to come back and teach. I long to go on retreats with them. It doesn't cause me suffering. You might look at that. That kind of longing, even I'm feeling it a little right now. It's like almost a joy comes to the heart of how fortunate I am to have such a being to long for. Put it that way. I forget who I was talking to Lama Eric about this same thing, and I said to him, wow, I feel like sometimes when I don't see my teachers, I'm on a desert. Of course, that's my own mind making that suffering image up, but the way we feel when Kempo Lodra Donya walks in the room or your teacher comes in the room, that joy, that happiness from a connection. So that kind of longing can be very helpful, especially in the Mahamudra Vajrayana type tradition, the importance of the guru, the teacher, in part because the path is one where we can make a lot of mistakes. And the teacher helps us not do that. And you've got that close connection to Trungpa Rinpoche, and I know you check with him, and then he points out, right? Like, don't fall off that cliff over here and don't go in that ditch over there. So we long for that. And then there's the longing that causes suffering. That's the way, the standard. Is this causing me suffering? Start with yourself. And because if it is, then it's going to cause those around you suffering. When I suffer, everyone around me suffers. Not because I'm a horrible person, it's the nature of our interconnectedness. We feel things from each other. That's why someone can walk in the room and we feel uplifted. No words said, no action other than walk in the room. And someone else can walk in the room and we go, you know, some of that's coming from our side, but we're interconnected on every level. So does it cause suffering? It brought to mind another teaching that Venerable Chidren gave me once when I was asking her the difference between self-grasping and self-centeredness. And she said something, as she usually does, very clear. This grasping at a self is the mental obscuration of thinking there's a self that's separate. So it's that kind of mental grasping. There is an I, and it's like this, and self and other, right? Remember the lovely Zen saying, no self, no other, no problem. But we make self, other, and problem. So just from habit of mind, nothing else. It's just a habit. It can be changed, and it changes as we engage in these practices. So grasping at that habit, thought, sensations of self is one of the foundational parts to suffering. And when we can loosen it up a little, you know, with sayings like no self, no other, or Lama Michael's emphasis on interdependence, deep interdependence. Zopa can't be here right now teaching without you here. And when one person leaves the room, it's a different scene. And if you all leave, it's a very different scene. We are interdependent constantly. So it points at that. The self-centeredness comes on top. The self-grasping's the obscuration, the mental obscuration set of thought. Then because we think there's a separate self, with, as Lama Michael says, territory to protect. I have personal territory to protect. And if you come in here, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Either really like you and grab on, or really neutral, like I don't care. You know, those are our three obscurations. Aversion, push away, attachment, grab, and ignorance, could care less. Don't even notice you. So the self-centeredness comes on top of that. It's all those piled on top of the mistaken thought, a very active mistaken thought that there's a separate I with personal territory. Yeah, great question. So Jane.
This has been this you could call it a problem, but it's a very joyful problem, but a problem nevertheless. For a long time where I lived, there wasn't a Sangha, there wasn't, there wasn't anything after my teacher passed away. And I was on my own, and now I'm here, and I am blessed with an abundance of things to do.
Oh yeah.
And it's very, I guess I'm enough of a beginner so that I have trouble making choices or knowing how to choose and how to let, what things to let go and what things to choose. And I'm doing the best I can, but if you have any advice on making choices when you have an abundance of things to do, I'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, this is our wonderful condition. We're just inundated. I mean, just, you put the word Buddha in the internet and like 1 million things come up. And that's our joy. The teachers in the group before us, I mean, I'm talking about like Venerable Chitran and Ken MacLeod and Lama Michael. They had so little to go on, Venerable Chitran, all in Tibetan, very few interpreters, no books. She created them for us, and the same with Lama Michael. Now look at our karma. I mean, we're just like, as you're saying, so much to do. So in Mahamudra, nothing to do. But first, a lot to do. So, we each have to sort this out for ourselves with our Sangha friends and with our teachers. And the thing I use is, and it shifts. I use, what am I drawn to right now? Not like the usual kind of zingy, watch another new movie, get another new novel, but more like checking in with your heart. What feeds the practice for you? What nourishes it? And we have to really watch that for ourselves. It won't stay the same. So I went to Khenpo Lodro Donya while he was here with the same issue, because it was like, oh my God, in 23 years now, all these empowerments, and then the Mahamudra and the Gelug lineage commitments and the new commitments with the Kagyu, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I'll share a bit of what he said, which came down to, let me think if this is helpful. It could be helpful for some, and if it's not, don't worry. He said, do you have confidence in these teachings about ordinary mind? I'm pointing again at the calligraphy over there that he referred us to, that Kala Rinpoche did. Do you have confidence in this sense of the appearance emptiness, how everything appears, it's completely impermanent, selfless, shifting? Do you have some confidence in that, even just intellectual? Because if you do, then any one practice contains all the others. This is not rocket science. He didn't say this part. I said this to myself after I left with some relief, because I was like, I can't keep doing these what have become formalistic practices for me, like they had kind of dried out in some ways, but only after doing them like 15 years, 6 years. You got to give it a try, okay? Because often we'll drop it too quick. That's our American choice thing, jumping from commodity to commodity, product to product. So watch out for that mind. I'm just a little tired of this, so spice me up with, another flavor. So watch out for that. Give whatever it is you've been introduced to a good try. Watch for it drying out or becoming overwhelming or like unhappy, because the awakened mind is not to lead us into a lot more lists where we don't fulfill them and then we beat ourselves up. As venerable children, you say, if you end up there, you're off the Dharma path. You're just on the worldly path of this list. I got to get number 1 through 10 done today. I only got 5 done, so oh my God, I failed. That's bringing the worldly mind to the Dharma and undermining Dharma. So find what's working for you of all the wonderful things that you've been introduced to. Choose 1, 2, or 3 or so, whatever your time allows, and practice it and see what happens. And then you can also, I've been meaning to talk about this. We do spiritual interviews with people one-on-one. I'm a little reluctant to say this because I don't, but we can. Bill and I will schedule them. You need to email us directly. We used to have a brochure that was called Interviews. Is it back, Linda? And it's got our emails in it, so it's in the back there. If you want a one-on-one with a teacher, we usually meet here in the interview room, sometimes before practice, sometimes after, sometimes totally other days. We're still kind of protecting Lama Michael's time because some people might think, oh, he's done with 3-year retreat, so we can all pile on him. But so that's a good tune-up. And also talk to your longtime practitioner friends. There are folks here with tons of experience at this. Is that good enough?
Yes.
Yeah, and then be happy. Whatever you choose, be happy. If it's not going towards happy, not Dharma. Not Dharma. Buddha, as my teacher used to say, at the risk of making Buddha seem solid, as she would say, Buddha doesn't want you to be unhappy, Zopa. That's not the way. Like, I didn't do my catechism. My thing comes in here from my fundamental Catholic. 6 years old, you memorize the whole 45-page catechism and recite it, and if you miss something, the nuns are not happy. But it was good. It taught me to memorize, which still serves me well. Bill.
To the extent that there's also a question of how much time to devote to which volunteer possibilities, then certainly one of the big questions, especially if we have flexible time or relatively flexible time, are we actually making time for retreat?
Thank you.
So making sure that we look out far enough so that however long that is in your life, and whether you're working or have more flexibility, being able to look out far enough so that you actually part the waves and can create space for retreat. That's really important. And on a day-to-day level, have we parted the ways enough to do something with practice within our daily schedule, formal practice? Are we carrying it into our activities? Have our activities become so intense that we lose track of even the slight fragrance of practice during the day? So those are kinds of questions to ask, and then within the question of how to point one's spiritual compass so it's effective. That can be there are many possibilities for kinds of practices and approaches, and so within that, then it's good to actually check in with whoever you feel some confidence in, to at whatever level, to kind of check about what could be the most fruitful. Where's the center of gravity? And you have to look in your own heart and mind and see where's the kind of the center of gravity of my practice now. And then in conversation you can find out how to take advantage of that momentum of the moment, and also what else might be complementary, or what might be just making things more complicated than necessary.
Peter. Oh, wait, back there first, Sean, and then Peter.
So I kind of feel like I have a dual lineage. Feels like Tibetan Buddhism is obviously one, but also Western psychology is another one for me. It feels like they compete at sometimes, and how I should progress in terms of my own work. And from a Western perspective, there's kind of this Jungian view of our shadow, and whatever we resist persists. So we have these dark sides, and obviously I struggle with, aggression and, sexual energy and depression and all these other things. And it feels like from that model, it would say, go into it further. Let's look at these things. Let's voice them. So if I'm sitting here feeling aggression or anger, I will let myself feel that and look at it and give myself permission to feel it. And maybe even, I don't know, and then it feels like from a Buddhist perspective, there's a lot of different methods, even within Tibetan Buddhism, but it feels like even what you were just saying is like, if it's not making you happy, there's kind of this turning the mind, at least in the Mahayana, towards compassion, loving kindness, that sort of thing. And I feel like those two things directly compete in terms of like, what method should I apply right now? And it feels like if I apply the Buddhist one, it feels like I'm in denial and it's going to come out in some other way. And if I apply the Western view, I'm in it, but I might be stuck in it.
Yeah. What do you mean by the denial piece? I get everything you're saying, but the denial piece, how would that be working in the mind?
Well, there's a lot of different things, but even I was just talking briefly about it with Doug over here, like, I'm not going to get into that, never mind, it's with something else. But like, for example, very simply, like I have anger, right? Mm-hmm. And I have hatred. Mm-hmm. And so if I was seeing a therapist around that, I would talk about my hatred and really allow myself to move into it and embody it and experience it and really go with it and visualize it, what I'd want to do to that person, etc.
Oh yeah, the story.
Yeah.
The story part that comes.
And that's felt very transformational and helpful.
Yes.
For me.
I found that too.
And I've seen that with other people too.
Yes.
And from a Buddhist perspective, I might apply an antidote to that, to say, oh, they suffer too, feel compassion for that. And they both feel very important in different ways, but I feel like I'm at a point right now where they're competing and they have different outcomes, and I feel very split, just personally on that.
Yeah. This is a great exploration. I'll just recommend a book that you might know, Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H. Do you know her work? Yeah, because it's quite good psychologically. And Ken McLeod's on Wake Up to Your Life. That one, really, he goes into the Western psychology and the Buddhist transformation. So what you're asking is quite huge, and I think a lot of us share the difficulties. So I'm just going to pull out one piece that I can see to maybe help with. So when you're doing the Western psychological part, and then you're doing the Buddhist part, from what you said, you're missing something in the Buddhist part. So I want to provide that, okay? Because it was provided to me. So the way you're describing the Buddhist part is well, I don't want to make this complicated, but I wanted to say middle turning of the wheel. Put that aside. It's one method of transforming the kleshas, anger, craving, indifference, called kleshas, the negative emotions, the suffering emotion. You described one way of transforming those, like see it, replace it with compassion, see it, send out loving kindness. Very powerful ways of doing it. So that's one tool in the belt. But the belt has a lot of other tools. And one that I think would be more like the Jungian approach or the therapeutic approach is, so you go into the story, I was abused like this, and I'm so angry about it. Okay, I don't want to minimize this, but that's kind of often the progression. And then we have a memory. The memory is a story, and it keeps shifting because we can't actually go back to the real scene, even if we could, even if it was filmed. Everyone would see that film differently, even the ones who were in it. Are you with me so far? Every time you see it, you'd see something new. Your mind's doing something different. So it's beginning to, the Buddhist approach here of Mahamudra is, anger. You can feel it in your body, right? So you go mindfulness of body, totally one-on-one with Buddhist teachings. Heat or cold, sweat, trembling, whatever, one-on-one. Then where it kind of parts in my experience, because I've done both therapy and Buddhism, is the story in the therapy session can become too solid, as though not only did that happen to me back then, but every time I tell it, it's like it's happening again. And there's some studies about that. I'll give one example. When 911 occurred and the planes drove into the towers, most Americans saw that like some 50 times or something. And there were some thoughts by psychologists and folks that know that each one was like a new trauma to the brain, to the mind. Okay, you with me so far? It's like 50 planes went into our towers, and those people were killed 50 times, because each time you're having a adrenaline, fear thing, right? So this can happen with therapeutic stories. What the Buddhist approach does differently is see into the nature of the fear, the nature of the anger, not the stories on this level. This thing really did happen. It had effects. Now you're telling it. And there is some healing in that. Most people have experienced that, some healing. But that's the story. And it's the story of this life, of this time. It can become very solid and lock you up at some point. No longer, this is what I experienced, no longer freeing, at first freeing, then, this is my whole identity now. I was a victim of this, that's my identity. I take that out and I run around the world with that identity as though it's solid. So we're back to this self that's protected, and Buddhism takes that self apart. Sees how? By seeing the nature of it. What is the nature of anger? When you sit with it, generally, a lot of sensations, depending on how potent it is, but let's say it's potent anger. A lot of sensations in the body. Are those stationary, solid, not changing? Are they? No. Okay, thoughts. Is it the same thought every time? Can feel like it, but is it? It can't possibly be the same thought. You cannot have the same thought twice. You can have a similar thought, but you cannot have the same thought twice. No one can. It's a brand new thought in a brand new moving moment. That's the nature. Once that nature is, I'm just talking conceptually, but the teachings are once that nature moves beyond concept to actually experiencing that ephemeral nature, you're free. In that moment, you're free. It's the kind of freedom we experience in our shine, our calm abiding, when we're going along caught in the story. Okay? Caught in the story, caught in the story, caught in the story. At some point, oh, I've been thinking about this. Back to the breath. Free. Free. Why? Because that unthing is an unthing. Words start to fail us here. Are you still with me? Okay. Words start to fail us. But in that way, the goal of therapy, the goal of Buddhism are different. Therapy is about having good in this life, a good this life. Good. Having some freedom from suffering. Buddhism is about seeing the actual nature and reality of everything, including the abuse, including the reaction, including including, nothing excluded. So they're not contradictory, but they have different purposes and methods. But there's a place, it seems to me, that it can come together there. So I would just say keep working on it and bring back your research, because you're doing this as your job. So it's helpful to others that you keep pondering that. But also don't start making a story that they're so different, they're so contradictory, I'm stuck at a crossroads. You see, now the mind creates these things. No such problem. When I got cancer, one of the strongest things that helped me was a book by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And it just said in it, when you think you have a problem, say to yourself, this is not a problem. I cracked up when I read that. I cracked up. I thought, I didn't know him at all. I just picked up this book. And I thought, that guy is nuts. I mean, when I have a problem, it's a problem. I got to solve it. And then I sat there and I kept reading, and I thought, I just stopped and I thought, if it's not a problem, what is it? And all these possibilities opened up, literally, from that question. If it's not a problem, what is it? So Shauna, if you stop seeing that as a problem, contradictory, it's, and start going, what is this? Just open to both. And there's a whole exploration in there for you. For all of us, the psychology of Western therapy and Buddhism, a big area. And there's a number of folks who've written The Wisdom of Imperfection by Rob Priest. Fantastic book, The Wisdom of Imperfection. He's a therapist and Buddhist. Wonderful book that explores right where you're at. So it's an exploration, not a problem. Okay? Thank you. I think Peter up here was waiting, right?
Yes, but I think are we at?
No, we have time for one more. We have time for you.
Okay.
There's the microphone.
Oh, thank you. Well, this is can use a short answer. We're talking about the kleshas, which seems to have pertained to several of the questions, and there are, if I recall, perfected forms of these kleshas. So we might talk about dharmic pride. The only one that I recall fairly clearly from having learned about them is the perfection of jealousy. People will often say, "Oh, I'm so jealous of you," or so. Well, not often for me, but
but it could happen.
but
Yeah.
And I remember that the perfected form, and I say, "Oh, I think you mean that you are filled with sympathetic joy." And that usually gets a very, very nice response. Oh,
Yeah.
that's lovely, you know. But I have forgotten the perfected forms of the other kleshas. And, you know, just, you know, you could quickly run through them. You know, it doesn't have to be a big
Maybe.
discussion, but, you know, just as a reminder, because if you, oh, I'm so angry, or I'm so
there
frustrated.
are
or whatever.
five kleshas, 5 wisdoms. The 5 questions can become the 5 wisdom. So anger, clarity. And you know, I'll say the interpretations I've had, and I love Bill or Dora to add theirs, because we always have different translators in Buddhism. So anger, clarity. Did you ever get so angry that something that had been very murky to you got suddenly clear? Like, I actually need to do this, and I've been mucking around. And boom. So anger, clarity. Attachment, discrimination. Like, you know, we get like, this is good, that's bad, and we get attached. But the discriminating mind sees that, you know, not caught in it, but actually sees, yeah, uniqueness, but a kind of equality too.
One taste.
Yeah, and then envy, you already said, that's a jealousy one.
Jealousy.
The clear one is empathy. No, it's accomplishing. Yeah, all accomplishing. And that's green Tara.
And this is for which?
The envy, jealousy. Let me explain it. So all accomplishing means I'm sitting here being jealous of you because you've accomplished something and I think I can't accomplish it. But when I get clear, I see I like that you're doing that and I can do something. Yeah. So it's called all accomplishing. Then what else do we have? We have attachment, aversion, ignorance. Oh, ignorance. Help me here. Oh, it's the pure wisdom. It's the pure wisdom of Tamal Shepa. Ignorance, the purest form is seeing the reality of everything. The appearance emptiness of everything. You, the building, me, this moment, you know. And I don't know what I've left out. Pride, what's the, yeah, it's equanimity, yeah. So pride, but yeah, it's complicated because there's a kind of dignity we want to hold, which would connect to the equanimity. Pride, the dignity of every person and even animals of having Buddha nature. So that's the equanimity. Everybody's got it. I don't have to rise above or below. I don't have to belittle myself like they've all got it and I don't. And I don't have to puff up. I've got it and they don't. Yeah. Okay, so they go like that. You can look them up. There's other words for them. Anything to add? Last words. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, there is a way in which this is, we can get kind of too involved in explaining this, because this is really, this goes in a certain way goes back to Sean's question with if you really can actually place your mind without being lost in the midst of a very kind of a radical emotional experience of whatever stripe, if you can actually place your mind within that and see the nature of it, the associated wisdom naturally arises. Yes. So getting wrapped up in the explanation can lead us away from the actual practice that is involved, which is this, is basically a matter of being able to cultivate insight in the midst of kind of radical experience, whatever kleshic origin it happens to have. So to go back to kind of like, well, now if I go back to my kind of beginner's status here, how do I gradually bring more attention into more mobile internal experience, kind of the churning? How do I bring attention in greater and greater amounts into that churn, so that I am less and less trapped. That's, you know, in the end, that's kind of, that's where just going back to your question, like the place where it actually all agrees is nobody's actually promoting the idea of being trapped in any of this.
Yeah.
It's just like, nobody votes for that. So then it's a matter of, like, you know, how are we going to approach it? And then the various pieces that we put into place in our practice can, from various different angles, encourage us to, I'd like to use the phrase, kind of degrees of freedom, increase the degrees of freedom within whatever experience is arising.
Okay. I think we're ready to put our other bookend in, which is to dedicate, so we don't lose this positive potential. And not only don't we lose it, but we give it away.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you so much.